This is my critique of Fullmetal Alchemist's third chapter, The Mining Town. If you'd like to see the previous videos, you can click on the link in the description. The brothers are traveling by train and make a stop at the coal mining town, Usewell. It appears to be quite destitute, evidenced by the lack of travelers on the train and citizens in town. A boy accidentally knocks into Edward and recognizes him as an outsider. The boy's name is Kyle. He treats Ed as a meal ticket and introduces him to his father as such. Meanwhile, in comedic fashion, Edward cannot get a word in edgewise. The father is referred to as Chief by the townspeople. If it hadn't been made clear already, they discuss their poor economic situation, even having to resort to extorting visitors. Amidst this comedic banter, an important detail is dropped. It is illegal to create gold from alchemy, which opens up a bunch of things I take issue with. However, for the time being, let's just concede that if you can create more of a valued resource, the less valuable it will become, in the most basic sense. Ed shows off his skills by repairing a tool. The chief brings up that he used to study alchemy, but had given up, adding some context to how difficult it is to even perform alchemy. It's a limitation that would be necessary to establish if Arakawa wanted to use this early 20th century era as a backdrop for her world, which is important, because it would be hard to imagine this world as is, where anyone is capable of performing alchemy. Let's just use one factor here: production. Wouldn't really need machinery for manufacturing if you could just draw a symbol or clap your hands together and instantly assemble the materials. If the product was damaged, the consumer could easily repair it themselves. With just that one change, this reality becomes unrecognizable from the one it's attempting to compare itself to, unless there are an exceptional few that are capable of using alchemy. In this case, it's not hard to imagine that the governments of this world would take a lot of interest in these people, demonstrated in this series with the state alchemists. Edward gives his name, which prompts the chief to take away the food offered, kicking the brothers out of the inn. The townspeople are clearly not welcoming of the military. Alphonse clarifies that he is not a state alchemist and is welcome back. The military's reputation is due to Lieutenant Yoki, who owns the lands where both the mines and the townspeople reside. He takes a huge cut of their profit and used it to gain the position he currently has. Any of the townspeople's attempts to expose him have been fruitless because he just bribes his superiors. The chief goes out of his way to single out state alchemists because of a "for the people" slogan. Seems unnecessary and kind of childish to treat military alchemists more harshly because of a motto. They already have motive to hate Yoki and the military in general over issues that personally affect them. It seems to be an attempt to force an on-running theme against alchemists joining the military. For example, Father Cornello had referred to state alchemists as dogs of the military. It was in character for him to say that since he wanted to kick off a revolution. Had the chief mentioned a state alchemist who had been willing to listen to the mining town's plights but refused to help, the slogan could have been used to have an ironic sting to it. As is, it's a weak crutch to throw a kid out on the street in the dead of night. Speaking of which, Alphonse greets his brother outside and catches him up to speed about the town's situation. The younger brother has gotten a bit shafted on characterization in the previous chapters, as he was mostly just following along with what his older brother told him to do. It was a good opportunity to show Al's quick thinking to gain info and procure food for Ed, since he obviously doesn't need it, showing off his quick-wittedness and care for his brother. Edward reiterates the military dog theme and was aware before joining the state alchemists didn't have a favorable reputation. He doesn't outright say his reasons for enlisting, but assumptions can be made. Ed seems to be well paid, acting without supervision, and being a part of the government likely gives him access to information that the public would not be aware of. We are informed that the brothers did have an alchemy instructor, but they shiver comically at the idea of her finding out they had committed human transmutation. Yoki enters the chief's tavern, reminding him of his outstanding tax payments. He threatens to lower his wages, which outrages Kyle, who throws a dirty rag at Yoki's face. He responds by slapping the boy into the ground and signals one of his grunts to slash his sword at the boy. Before things can escalate, Edward steps in, breaks the soldier's sword with his automail arm. Ed reveals his watch, which Yoki recognizes and realizes he is a state alchemist. Yoki immediately starts sucking up to Edward. It's also mentioned that state alchemists work directly under the president, which also contextualizes why the Fullmetal Alchemists would be so well known even in that other town as well. Ed plays along with Yoki while mocking the townspeople. Contrasting with the rest of the town, Yoki enjoys a meal and wine served by his maids in his manor. Edward continues to play along with Yoki until he reveals his intentions. He wants to bribe Edward in order to attain a higher position within the government. One of Yoki's goons lets him know that the townsfolk don't plan on being civil much longer. Yoki orders the chief's inn to be burned down. Kyle begs Edward to create gold for him, but Ed refuses right away. While this frustrates the boy, Edward reasons that Yoki will just take the money anyways, advising them to leave and start a new life. The chief lets him know that this is the only home they'll ever have. This strikes a chord with Ed by the looks of this panel. Under normal circumstances, the inn being burned down should be devastating. The characters certainly act as if it were. Although it's surprising they don't ask either of the brothers to restore the building. It's possible Yoki's men may come back to burn it down again, but this is my rationale. The manga makes no effort to explain why Edward or Alphonse wouldn't do so, and the villagers don't ask them to. Let's reference episode 9 of the 2003 adaptation. The creators must have realized this lapse in logic because they decide to have the inn fully restored with the implication that Edward had repaired it.
But our inn was destroyed last night.
Really? Then what's that over there?
The brothers make their way to the rail yard. Edward transmutes gold from coal, which raises some issues if this were even possible from our current understanding of alchemy. This is due to Alphonse's specific phrasing from the first chapter regarding only being able to transmute something of the same substance. This is reinforced by the fact that Edward had the ingredients for an adult human, and why would he need all that if all that was required was something of the same mass? Another important limitation of alchemy that Arakawa might have wanted to stay true to, because this could easily de-escalate stakes and question character competence. For example, why did Edward transmute a wall to block Father Cornello's gunfire? Why not just transmute a tank from the ground? Again, to reference the 2003 adaptation, I would assume the creators saw this as another issue. They go out of their way to show Edward transmuting the gold coins that Yoki bribed him with to cover the coal.
What you're about to see stays just between us.
Even if you're willing to concede that Ed's gold transmutation from the manga was even possible, this means any capable alchemist can make it. Thus, the law against creating gold would be hard to enforce because, as far as been presented with, there isn't a way to tell if alchemy has been used on an object. Edward may not be willing to break the law for his own benefit. However, if there was a less virtuous and clever alchemist who was in dire need of cash, I'm not quite sure how the government could track and stop him. It would be hard to imagine a sustainable economy based on gold in this world if it's this easy to create. Edward offers the gold for the deed to the Uswell property, even buttering up Yoki by promising him to put in a good word to the higher-ups. Ed adds the caveat that the trade needs to be free of charge since this gold was created with alchemy. Yoki is only overly eager to ditch the town and gleefully accepts the terms. Now, there is a clear motive for why he would want this trade. Though I do take issue with him being so trusting. Could have been mitigated if Edward had spent more time with Yoki, proving he was just as depraved as him, or had Ed given a phony reason for him to buy the town, or all those things. For example, if Edward offered to help burn down the inn in order to gain Yoki's trust, it's not as if he couldn't just use alchemy to repair the whole thing. Regardless, it's just all too convenient that Yoki is this idiotic. There just isn't any dramatic tension to how all this is going to play out. Meanwhile, the chief is attempting to talk the townspeople out of assaulting Yoki's manor. To the dismay of everyone, Edward returns with the ownership of the town signed over to him. We witness him enjoy himself by shocking the community before offering to sell the deed to them. Worth pointing out, a line is dropped subtly about them being vagabonds. The chief asks for Ed's price. In response, he goes through a long-winded description of what the parchment is made from, and about the seal and the ink printed on it, which may have us recall that first discussion with Rose. Ultimately, Edward is willing to part with the property for one night's stay, which the chief is obviously willing to accept. Ed ends a rebellion before it begins again. As well, Edward's personality shines again in this moment. I don't believe there's any room for doubt that Edward is a good person that helps those in need. However, he also has quite the ego, mixing these elements through Ed playing with them by stretching out his eventual surrender of the property. While this may seem cruel from the townspeople's perspective, I would argue this works as his payback for throwing him out of the inn. Yoki and his men storm in after discovering the gold was now all coal, arguing their deal is void. Ed confirms that he had transmuted them back and that Yoki signed to transfer the property rights free of charge. Yoki and his men make an attempt to take back the documents, and in return they are beaten back by the townspeople. To add insult to injury, Edward promises to let his superiors know of Yoki's actions. The chapter ends with a rambunctious celebration. So this appeared to be an attempt to shift to a less consequential and more character-focused side story, which would help flesh out the world of the manga, as we've seen with the notoriety of the state alchemists and those who take advantage of their position within the military, to the dismay of the common folk. The brothers' personalities do get time to shine, but their intelligence takes a hit. It was helpful to set a limitation on the amount of people capable of performing alchemy. Nevertheless, it should be imperative to uphold rules already set, such as only being able to create objects that are made from the same substances. I'll reiterate that if anything can be created just because it shares the same mass, this will hinder the ability to build tension. Additionally, I would have preferred gold transmutation never be acknowledged, as this opens up so many issues that I don't think Fullmetal Alchemist wants to concern itself with. For instance, the government creates laws against creating gold, but they also have alchemists on their payroll. So what's to stop them from creating their own gold to trade and compete with other nations? To add to that, what's to stop an individual alchemist? Unfortunately, it's a small story that opens up large problems, but that's all for now, and thanks for watching.